Jon Favreau, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. Swingers has been my favourite movie for a long, long time.
Fantastic.
But coming off Iron Man and Iron Man 2, two of the most successful movies in Marvel's back catalogue, you could have made any single movie you wanted. What drew you to this? Was it the originality?
Yeah, it was something very different. I mean, I don't know if, certainly when you're receiving scripts, and clearly the success of that franchise had put me on the top of people's lists for who they were going to submit work to when they found out that I was interested in doing work outside of the Iron Man franchise. You get them, and when you're dealing with films of this size, and any effects film is going to be an expensive movie. It's just the nature of the medium. They tend to be very similar, and they tend to be sequels, and they tend to be remakes or superhero movies. There's really not a lot else going on in Hollywood. And so when I saw the title Cowboys and Aliens, immediately I said, well, this is something I'd not seen on the screen before. And then I read it and saw what Steven Spielberg and Ron Howard, the way they had developed it in recent years. It's been around for a while, first as a comedy, and then they abandoned that notion. And then they played it very straight, and they let the comedy and the fun come from the irony implied in the title, and combining these two genres played very straight. And I thought to myself, I love both genres. I could really do a great job with this movie. It's risky because it's original and different, and maybe confusing. But if now's the time to try something, and nobody else is really doing anything original and taking risks on this scale, and I gave it a shot, and I've had probably the most fulfilling experience of my directing career, working with these wonderful people, sharing a unified vision and presenting something new to an audience that is definitely creating a passionate response. Either a confused response or a very passionate and accepting response. But I feel like I'm doing something. That's that has some significance to it, and it was as I said, something that I felt strongly about, and I was able to see through.
And it's very much a John Ford vibe.
Yeah.
It's very much a Western with a hint of sci-fi, with a hint of E.T. or whatever you want to say there.
Sure.
Was that always the intention, and did that make it more of a difficult sell to the studio until you bring in Daniel Craig or you bring in Harrison Ford, because they're so used to the comic books and the known titles?
They diverged from the comic book a lot by the time I had received the script, and really it was the title and the conceit that they borrowed, and some of the characters, but there's a common shared passion for the Western that Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, myself, and the actors that are involved share. And you cannot make a Western on this scale. It just is not a commercially viable thing. And I think that the opportunity to introduce a more commercial genre to it allowed us to really embrace the tropes and the history of the Western. And for us, part of the job is to try to make the money back for your investor. Part of it is to do something you're passionate about. And part of it is to keep the tradition of the cinema alive and to introduce kids who've never been exposed to the Western to the very significant element of the Western was an important thing for us. Yeah. And I know that as my son sees this, he's being introduced to things and traditions that maybe as he grows to understand film better, he'll understand. But this will be the first introduction to it, and we really tried to play it straight and stay true to those traditions.
And in the opening credits, I found myself with a big smile across my face because your name's right next to Steven Spielberg's there. And I was brought back to that scene in Swingers, the Jaws music.
That's right.
In Swingers, where you're walking over to the girl, Mikey's walking over to the girl.
We had to reach out to him.
Yeah, and Spielberg had to the rights to that.
Right.
So how surreal an experience is it then? And when you seen your name there alongside Spielberg's, were you taken back to '95?
It's been a long journey. It's been a long journey because Steven had seen Swingers, and I had gotten the word that he really liked my writing, and so I was very flattered by that. And I've met him from time to time. Of course, he hired Vince Vaughn to be in Lost World after that. So I got to go to the wrap party of Lost World, and I got to say hello to him. And then later, through Gwyneth Paltrow, who's very close with him during the Iron Man movies, I saw him again at Apple's birthday in Santa Monica. And then finally now I was able to sit with him and be brought into his office and collaborate with him. And boy, he has the enthusiasm of a first-time director when you sit down with him. And that was my boss. So he really gave me a tremendous amount of freedom and support and tutelage. I mean, I learned a tremendous amount from watching films with him. He screened The Searchers for us, talked us through every scene. And as a filmmaker who's had some success, you think that that phase of your career is over. But then to be working with he and Ron Howard was a tremendous opportunity, because I not only learned more about making movies, but just to watch how they live their life and to emulate them and the way they balance things was incredibly. I was incredibly grateful for that opportunity.
And you're very much on the way to a similar level of fanboy love.
Uh-huh.
They've really embraced you. The social
you.
networking side of things as well. We were talking off camera there about gettingitmade.com back in 2000.
Yes, that's right.
You were one of the first guys
to
interact with the fans like that, and that way
Yes.
now you've got 1 million something followers on
That's
Twitter.
right. That's right.
How important is it for you to even not just at Comic-Con, but on, you know, to reach out to the fans and see what the kind of feedback you're getting from the fans, because they really do. They have embraced you in a big way.
Well, it's really interesting because you get to pay attention to what everybody's saying. Your fans and people who aren't your fans. You get to listen in at the water cooler if you just do a search. And so you're getting a sense of people who are, you know, you have all these micro reviewers who have their own blogs. Then you have the mainstream bloggers, and then you have the mainstream media. And then you have your fans. And through social networking, you could touch any one of those groups and hear what they have to say, or even create a dialogue. And I tell you, it's fun for when you go to different parts of the world like this to already have a channel of communication.
Yeah.
When I come here to London, you know, I'm interacting with those fans or hearing what they have to say throughout the process of making a movie. So it feels like you're returning. And it's funny how social networking is used for so many things, for positive things, for negative things, for political change, to sell out arenas for musical events. So it's part of the new world, the new order. I'm 44 now, so you know it's a bit of a novelty for me. But for the next generation, it's going to be part of it. It's going to be the way things are distributed. You know, that's all. It's all one thing now, and the world is getting much smaller, and films are coming to reflect that.
And it's funny that it's the last season of Entourage. It's into the 8th season of Entourage.
Uh-huh.
And the creator Doug Ellen has since come out and said everybody thought that Vince was based on Mark Wahlberg, but it's not. He's come out and said it wasn't. It was based on you and Vince Vaughn. That's why the character's called Vince. Did you notice? And because it's only kind of recently kind of come out and said that.
Well, it's so.
Is it flattering as well?
It is flattering, and I think that and have at it.
He's obviously a big Swingers fan.
Have at it, you know. And I know I come here, I see a commercial with moneysupermarket.com. They seem to have appropriated our tagline of your money.
Yeah.
And you don't even know it. I've seen billboards that said Vegas, baby, Vegas years ago. I think if you're part of the cultural conversation, that means that you're making an impact. And as long as people acknowledge it, it's not stealing. It's an homage. And certainly Swingers had enough homages to other films. And I'm the first to admit that I was influenced by Albert Brooks and Modern Romance. Or the scene with the Pigeon Sisters in Odd Couple influenced the scene in the Jetstream trailer. So I think that we all borrow from one another. I point that out. Even then, I understood that. The Tarantino pastiche. So I'm happy to be part of that. Good for them on Entourage. I think you know, they've brought their voice to that. It's not like they were imitating us. They brought their own take on it. And I'm flattered, you know, and I hope that I could still do original work and still influence things. And I think that, especially with this film, what's interesting now is everybody sees it as something so new, of mashing things up and playing it straight, not playing it as a comedy, but letting the irony bring out the comedy in it. And then you're going to see films like Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter coming out, and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
It's a real ripple effect. I
think that there's going to be a whole new wave of you know, as in music they mash up, and as in cuisine they mash up different ethnicities of food. I think that that's part of what our generation and the next generation do. They reflect, their art reflects the art that came before them, and I think though this is a new thing and exciting to some, off-putting to others, it's something that I think is going to be significant when we look back. Just as you look at Swingers now, that movie made $5 million in the theaters. It wasn't very successful at the time. But as you see the Judd Apatow films now that are clearly reflections of a similar sensibility, doing in excess of $100 million, you realize that as the society changes, it reflects things that were initially marginal, different original pieces of entertainment. So as long as I could be sometimes in the curve, sometimes ahead of it, you just don't want to be outside of the conversation. And with Iron Man, I was lucky to land right in the middle of it. You know, I wasn't the first superhero film. I was able to flow into it when it was part of what the general public would accept. And with Elf, the success was there. But with other films, you know, sometimes like Swingers, you land a couple years early. But I'm getting to do what I love, and it's you know, no complaints here.
The movies are going to find a following on the line anyway. Jon Favreau.
I think so. I think, look, a lot of care goes into it. Nothing's done out of laziness. Nothing's done out of lack of passion. And it was great to be able to get together with these people and create something with such a shared passion. And that really is what makes my job worthwhile.
Jon Favreau, it was an absolute pleasure to meet
Great.
you, sir.
Pleasure talking to you.